1820, a whaling ship met its fate, not by storm, but by the wrath of a whale. In August of 1819, the whaling ship Essex departed Nantucket, Massachusetts, bound for the distant hunting grounds of the South Pacific. She was not a mighty frigate nor a great merchantman, but a modest vessel of 88 feet, her timbers weathered, her sails patched, her mission desperate: oil. Whale oil, lit lamps, greased machines, and powered economies. To Nantucket's families, it was fortune itself, and the men of the Essex had come to claim their share. Her captain, George Pollard, Jr., was young and cautious, commanding a crew of 20, including his first mate Owen Chase and cabin boy Thomas Nickerson. Below deck, casks and harpoons rattled, and the smell of tar, salt, and blubber clung to the wood. Above, the masts groaned under canvas as the Essex slipped past the Atlantic horizon and into the trade wind. The voyage was grueling from the start. Storms battered her off Cape Horn, splintering spars and sweeping provisions overboard. Rats infested the bread stores. Water turned foul in its casks. Yet the ship endured, and so did her men. By late 1820, after months of empty seas, they entered the Pacific whaling grounds where giants lurked beneath the waves. For days they lowered boats, chasing leviathans that surfaced like mountains of flesh, their spouts rising in silver arcs. Each hunt was perilous. Men hurled harpoons from fragile open whale boats, lines screaming as enraged sperm whales dragged them across waves. Still, oil was gathered, barrels slowly filled, and hope restored. The Pacific promised riches, but it also promised secrets. Beneath the calm blue horizon, something watched, immense and unyielding, preparing to right its fury across their voyage. On the morning of November 20th, 1820, the Essex hunted as she always had. Whaleboats fanned across the Pacific, crews bent to oars, harpoons at the ready. But on that day, one leviathan rose unlike any other. A sperm whale nearly 85 feet long, larger than the ship itself. Its massive head broke the surface with a thunderous crash, spout rising like steam from a furnace. At first, the men thought it only another quarry. Then, with terrifying deliberation, the whale turned. It swam directly at the Essex, striking her bow with such force that timbers groaned like bones snapping. The ship reeled, sails shuddering. The creature sank briefly, then returned, circling with dreadful patience. The crew shouted from their small boats, powerless to intervene. Moments later, the whale charged again. Its head smashed the hull amidships, opening planks to the sea. Water poured into the hold, flooding the casks of oil. Men scrambled back aboard, some crying prayers, others clutching tools, but the ship was doomed. The Leviathan, its jaw scarred and battered, lingered a moment on the surface as if to witness the ruin it had wrought. Then it vanished beneath the waves, leaving silence broken only by the rush of water pouring into the dying vessel. The Essex listed heavily, her masts dipping toward the horizon. Within minutes, she was unfit for sail, her deck awash, cargo ruined, her crew gathered in stunned disbelief. They had faced storms, hunger, and the cruelty of the sea, but never vengeance from the very prey they hunted. In that instant, the hunters had become the hunted, and the Pacific showed them no mercy. By noon on November 20th, the Essex was finished. Her decks were awash, barrels of whale oil floating like wreckage, sails torn and rigging sagging into the sea. Captain Pollard gave the only order left: abandon ship. The crew gathered what they could from the ruins: compasses, charts, navigational tools, a handful of casks of water and bread, and whatever tools the sea had not already claimed. They lowered the 3 surviving whaleboats, fragile craft built for hunting, not survival. The Pacific stretched in every direction, an unbroken horizon of blue. With little more than their clothes, a few provisions, and boats barely fit for the open ocean, the 20 men faced a choice no sailor wished to make. To the west lay the Marquesas and Tahiti, rumored with tales of cannibals. To the east, South America, thousands of miles away, but familiar in its Christian ports. Fear, not reason, steered their decision. They turned east, into a voyage of nearly 3,000 miles. The boats pulled away as the Essex settled lower, her proud masts tilting like gravestones against the sky. Some men wept openly, others sat in stunned silence as the only home they had known for over a year slipped beneath the Pacific. The smell of oil lingered on the water, mingling with salt and ruin. By dusk, nothing remained but scattered wreckage drifting in the swell. The whaleboats, overloaded and fragile, pitched heavily in the waves. Above them, the stars emerged, vast and indifferent, charting their impossible course across an ocean too wide to imagine. The men of the Essex had become castaways, their fate tied not to harpoons or sails, but to hunger, thirst, and the endurance of desperate men. Days blurred into weeks as the whaleboats drifted eastward. The sun hammered down without mercy, bleaching faces and splitting lips. Water rations dwindled to spoonfuls a day, ladled from casks that soon ran dry. Salt spray crusted on skin, and the ocean itself mocked them, endless water they could not drink. Bread crumbled into dust, soaked in brine, and eaten in desperate handfuls. Men grew hollow, their strength seeping into the sea. Sharks followed, their fins slicing through swells, patient as death. At night, the boats rocked in rhythm with the stars, the constellations their only compass. Each sunrise brought not hope, but dread. Another day of thirst, another tally of dwindling bodies. Some prayed aloud. Others stared mutely at the horizon, lips too cracked for words. Occasional luck sustained them, flying fish leaping into the boats, or a seabird struck down and eaten raw, feathers and all. Yet such gifts were rare, and hunger gnawed like a second sea, swallowing men from within. The young cabin boy Nickerson later wrote of delirium, of men speaking nonsense, their minds burning with fever. First Mate Owen Chase, in his journal, recorded the agony with calm precision. We subsist on little more than air. Storms battered them, soaking through clothes and supplies, leaving the men shivering under torn sails, fashioned into makeshift shelters. They patched hulls with scraps of canvas, bailed constantly to stay afloat. Each boat drifted apart and rejoined, straining against waves that seemed eager to scatter them forever. The Pacific was no longer horizon and sky. It was a wilderness, vast and merciless. In it, 20 men dwindled to shadows, haunted by thirst that could not be quenched and hunger that grew sharper with every empty dawn. December, the ocean had stripped the survivors of strength and will. Men slumped in the bottoms of boats, skin leathered by sun, eyes hollow, ribs stark against parchment flesh. Some whispered deliriously, others no longer stirred at all. Death came quietly at first, a sailor collapsing mid-oar, another fading in his sleep. Their bodies were committed to the sea with trembling hands, prayers broken by dry throats. But as hunger grew sharper, the choices became darker. In Owen Chase's account, the crew resorted to tearing flesh from birds raw, gnawing bones until nothing remained. When provisions vanished entirely, the sea offered no more gifts. The men faced the truth. Survival meant crossing a line that could never be erased. The first to die became sustenance for the living. The act was performed in silence, heads bowed, knives trembling. No one spoke of it aloud, but all took part. When death claimed another, the grim ritual repeated. The men did not look into each other's eyes. They chewed in silence, the sound of waves masking the horror. It was necessity, not malice, that drove them, yet the weight of it pressed heavier than thirst or storm. In journals, they would later write sparingly of these days, as if words themselves could not bear the memory. The ocean offered no judgment. It stretched endless and indifferent, a mirror to human desperation. Above, seabirds wheeled in circles, drawn to the smell of salt and decay. Below, sharks trailed the boats, feasting on what the men could not bring themselves to consume. The whaleboats had ceased to be vessels of survival. They were now floating graves, each stroke of the oar a bargain struck with despair. By January 1821, the whaleboats were skeleton crews drifting toward oblivion. Starvation had reduced them to shadows, and the sea showed no mercy. The men knew that unless Providence intervened, none would survive. In the boat of Captain Pollard, the decision arose, grim and deliberate, that one life must be given for the rest. Lots were drawn. The fate fell upon young Owen Coffin, Pollard's own cousin. The boy accepted his doom with a silence that chilled his shipmates more than any storm. His friend Charles Ramsdell, hand trembling, was chosen to fire the pistol. The crack echoed across the Pacific, louder in their ears than thunder. The act was over in seconds, but its memory stretched eternal. The survivors ate in silence, every bite a weight heavier than hunger itself. Other boats faced the same horror. Death claimed men one by one, and the living fed on the dead. Journals written later spoke in careful lines, sparing words to mask unbearable truth. Yet witnesses confirmed what silence could not hide. The Essex survivors endured by crossing into the unspeakable. The sea bore witness with indifference. Sharks followed still, feeding on scraps that drifted overboard. The sun rose and set without pity, gilding the boats in gold while men inside withered like shadows. Each night, stars glittered above like cold eyes, and each dawn, fewer men answered the call of the oar. The lottery of death, as later accounts named it, ensured that a handful survived. But survival came at a cost deeper than starvation. Those who lived carried a burden that the ocean had not taken. The knowledge of what men can do when the horizon offers no mercy. By February 1821, the ordeal had dragged on for more than 90 days. The survivors were little more than husks, their skin stretched thin over bone, their eyes sunken deep into skulls. In Owen Chase's boat, only 3 men remained. In Captain Pollard's, 2. The others had been taken by hunger, thirst, or the lottery of death. Each sunrise seemed to be the last, each wave a possible grave. On February 18th, salvation appeared. Chase's boat, adrift and barely afloat, was sighted by the brig Indian. The sailors who lifted them aboard recoiled at their condition, emaciated, delirious, barely alive. Weeks later, Pollard's boat was found by the Nantucket vessel Dauphin. Inside were 2 survivors, half dead and surrounded by the bones of their shipmates. In all, only 8 of the original 20 men lived to return. They carried no riches, no oil, no trophies of the hunt, only the memory of horror. Their testimonies would later inspire Herman Melville, who wove fragments of their ordeal into Moby-Dick, a story where obsession with the whale ends in ruin. Back in Nantucket, the survivors were received with a silence heavier than welcome. Families mourned, neighbors whispered, and the whaling community understood that the ocean had exacted a debt that no profit could balance. For Captain Pollard, the loss of his ship and kin was a wound that never closed. He would never command another voyage. The Pacific kept its indifference. Its horizon remained unchanged, its waters rolling as they always had. The tragedy of the Essex lived not in the sea, but in the men who returned and the stories they carried. Tales of hunger, death, and the wrath of a whale that turned hunters into prey.